Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSec Network. Friend, today we are going to discuss a very important topic, democratic institution. We all know democracy has taken root in different countries. Majority of the countries across the world has adopted democracy as a form of governance. We know the democracy success is not only getting majority in the election, but also it depends on the various institutions that helps in working day-to-day affairs of the life, how those institutions function and what are the important role they play. We'll come to know in today's lectures, and we'll try to understand from the very basics of the institutions and their role. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in a studio Dr. Satish Kumar. He teaches political science in Central University, Haryana, and has over 10 years of experience, and he specializes in his international politics, comparative politics, and also conflict studies. So I certainly hope his lecture will help us to understand this topic and give insight how to understand the democratic institutions and their roles. So on his behalf, I welcome him for the EduSec lecture on this very topic.
Good afternoon.
Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. Definitely this theme is very important when we try to understand more than 2/3 of the world are under the framework of democracy. But democracy itself cannot excel, and that is why we have different versions of setup in the world. Some of the countries are known as a liberal democrat. Some of the countries are known as better embedded democratic structures. A very glaring example, if you want to identify in South Asia, despite having many problems in India and Sri Lanka, we can see that democratic structure, the minimum credibility, the minimum requirement for a smooth functioning of democracy is running in Sri Lanka and India, whereas in Pakistan and some of the other South Asian countries, it is a halted democracy. Sometimes is a democratic, sometimes is a military rule. So why is it so? This is one fundamental questions which we need to raise. And not only this question of Pakistan, or Bangladesh, or Myanmar, where the junta is in power, in Nepal, but even in the European countries, the percentage of pure democracy is hardly present as it has been thought of, as it has been explained, enunciated by the political thinkers. What should be the parameter of a successful democratic structure? So to have a democracy, a smooth functioning, it cannot, unless until it is dependent on multiple layer or multiple strand of institutions. The institutions create a viable, smooth, and well embedded functioning of any democracy. The purpose of a democracy is to reach out to the larger section of the people. In the words of Gandhi, when the last man of a village feels himself or herself empowered or the part of the system, then we can call it the true democracy. The democracy is reaching out to the last person. To reach out to the last person, it cannot flow down from parliament to that far-flung areas of any country. For that, we need to have a very well-structured pillars of institutions. So here we need to understand theoretically what is the relevance of the institutions. Why do we need to have the institutions? So for better understanding of the institutions, if you try to see in the perspective of a theory, we have a different kind of theories which analyze the role of the institutions, the relevance of the institutions. And one of the very prominent theory, the perspective is historical perspective of understanding the institutions. There are many thinkers, modern thinkers like Binder, Rodson, and many others have explained that the structure of the institution has flown down from one period to another period, and more or less it has get carried forward. The structure which were present, which were existed 50 years back or 100 years back, that get it forward today and tomorrow. So this is what we try to understand in the perspective of historical perspective of institution building. There is another theoretical perspective is sociological perspective, in which the culture, the norms of the society are more prominent. The third, which is the most modern and well accepted part of institution, the theoretical understanding of the institution, is rational thinking. In other words, it is also called Weberian thinking. The Max Weber, who in his very important work on society and economy laid the foundations of understanding of the institutions, in which the bureaucracy is more or less till today is debated. Okay, what should be an ideal structure of a bureaucracy? There should be autonomy, there should be competitiveness, there should be it should be salary based, it should be professionals. There are a number of parameters which you have decided, which we need to have for a smooth functioning of any institutions. So after analyzing the different kind of theories, we need to understand what is the relevance of the institutions. Why we need, if the institutions are not there, and if you read the history of either of India, of China, or any part of the world, of European countries, we can analyze whenever there was a problem, like the Dark Ages, which was prevalent in all over Europe after 11th to almost 14th century. It was muddling of different institutions. The private and public sphere were submerged. There was no crystal clarity. Okay, what is a private sphere and what is a public sphere? The person who was handling the religion was also handling the political structure. He was defining the policy, at the same time implementing the policy. So if all the powers comes under an individual or a group of people, then what happens? The different layers of the institutions which were meant to define and play a different roles get defeated. And even if you have a chair which has 3 or 4 legs, if the one leg is broken, then it becomes risky to sit on that chair. you can fundle, you can fall down. In the same way, there are different institutions to run the state. And running smoothly the state is the purpose of empowering the people. The basic aims and objectives which we study under the political science is to not only reaching out to the people, but making the people more accessible to the state, and their ability, their skills, their comforts, their security should be strengthened day by day. If all these parameters are not taking place, if it is falling down one after another, if my life is not getting better what it was today, from today to tomorrow, or yesterday to today, if it is not getting better, then it means the set of systems which are in place within the state are not functioning. It is not only an individual, but the larger section of the society feel unhappy. Not only unhappy, but they lose the faith in the state, the trust of deficit. That it means somehow the proper functioning of these institutions are halted. It is not up to the requirements of the people of the particular country. So we need to have the institutions. If the institution is well embedded, well built, well spread its wing, it does defeat individual charisma. Why the US democracy is called the oldest democracy? Not only the oldest democracy, but it is a well embedded democracy than any part of the world. And that is why the change of the gear, the change of the president does not send a trigger to the people to get hanky-panky. People remain very silent, confident. Today is Obama, tomorrow would be Hillary Clinton, or anybody would be the president. But since the institution is so well rooted in the ground, nothing is going to be very topsy-turvy. But sometimes when the institutions are not well rooted, what happens by flick of disappearance of an individual gives a very saddening, frustrating moment to the large section of the society. And many of us have realized this fact when the first Prime Minister of India passed away. The sadness looms large in India, and they started calling who will be the next Prime Minister of India? What will happen to this country? Same thing repeatedly happened when Mrs. Gandhi was being assassinated. The people started asking the same questions. The reason of this lack of confidence, which we feel the pinch, is because of lack of proper settled institutions in our country. So that is the importance of institutions. It provides and creates rule of law. rule of law is not only an handiwork of legislature, our executive, but it is a very complex structure in which many institutions play combined role. Replacement of a gap of one particular institution creates havoc. Like if you take the example of Mumbai attack 3 years back, 3 or 4 years back, it clearly indicated that somewhere, somehow, there was a gap in the security institutions of our country, which were placed to not only to protect the country from outside attack, but internal safety measure should be also worked upon time to time. So internal and external security are completely looked by the security agencies which work under the control of civilian political authority. So political institutions, military institutions, and other institutions, they play a combined and joint role to protect the lives of the people of this country. If any of them show a lackluster approach, then there is going to be a terrorist attack, there is going to be a riot, there is going to be infighting within that country. So the importance and the relevance of the institutions are always prominent. If it is based on the self-interest of a particular individual, like not only in India, if you take the example of African countries, in the 60s and 70s, some of the East Asian countries also, they had the brunt, because some of the regimes were run by a particular individual, and particular individual try to create its own forte. He recruited armies and security personnel from a certain pockets of his own interest and self and vested interest. That has created disenchantment among the other section of the society, and that finally led to the civil war. And that civil war divided the country into the completely two or more than two parts. The Arab Spring, which was started in 2011 and is still continuing with the chain reactions from one country to another country, clearly you can identify the regions of its inflame are many, but one of the important regions of infighting in these countries are lack of functioning of the institutions in these countries. Either it is the economic institutions or the political institutions or judicial institutions or security institutions are not working together for the benefit of this country. So we need to have a very clear understanding about the role of the institutions. No country in the world can function. Even those who are not democratic, it is a semi-monarchy, or monarchy itself, or feudal, even if they want to continue for a longer period of time, they also have to base their strength on functioning of the institutions. We can identify from Indian history from the Mughal time to till today, in different set of regimes, without functioning of the institution, even British would not have ruled this country for more than 200 years. So the revenue system, which were based on certain institutions, there are many other services which were well placed, making the bridge, starting the railway, protecting the country from the aggressions of the other countries, which all needed a very strong set of the systems, which was based on the institutions which were well placed in this country. And that is why Britishers managed to rule this country for more than 200 years. So after understanding the relevance of the institutions, we now come down a different kind of institution. For layman understanding, we can divide it into a two way. One is a formal, another is informal. The formal institution is definitely related with the state. The different organs of the state will come down and categorize the formal structure into other sets of the institutions like political, administrative, judicial, and security. In the non-formal set of institutions, it is more complex. And why it is more complex? And there is a tandem correlations between the formal as well as informal. Like the social structure, the complexity within the society of a value system, norms, the culture are informal set of system. Because we study in political science, we study in sociology, that as a human being we live in the two places. One is society, another is a state. And there is complete correlation between the two. One strengthens each other. And if the institutions are well placed and support each other, if it is otherwise, then there is a conflict between the society and the state. And that conflict leads to a different kinds of the problems. And that problems derail the state structure. And finally, it pushes it to the boundary of collapse. And that is why you might have been hearing in the news, you might have been reading in the newspaper and in the textbook of political science that there are certain states which have been categorized as a failed state, or they are on the verge of a failed state. And Pakistan, the name of the Pakistan sometimes appears that Pakistan is standing on the verge of being a failed state. Myanmar, many African countries where the ethnic wars are going on for many, many years, they are already been declared as a failed state. So basically the concept of the failed states, the agency which determined is also very controversial. Sometimes it is the norms, the parameters of being a failed state is decided in think tank of USA, which itself has a vested interest. So we cannot very simply, but the matter of the fact, which is very clear, as a student and researcher, we need to understand that the basic parameters, the basic requirements which a state must do for its own citizen, if they are unwilling to do it, if they are unwilling to handle it, then definitely the problem will crop up, the problem will rise or multiply, and it will pushes the state on the verge of being failure. So, what we need to have a better understanding between the formal and informal structures and pillars of the institutions. If they are working together to sort out the problems of the citizen of that country or the people of that country, then there is a proper understanding between the two, and economic development, better understanding of democracy also becomes more entrenched. Why we call democracy is not merely political terms, but it is a social terms as well. When we try to understand if within the family, the grooming of an individual where we live in a family and society is highly undemocratic. If there is a completely authoritarian structure in your family where your share of interest or your share of power is being grabbed by others, then you do not have the faith in democracy. If tomorrow if you becomes a very important leader and in a position to draft the policy or run that particular organizations, that lopsided understanding of structure will dictate your mind, and vice versa. It cannot be. The organization which is led by you will turn on the path of democracy. So within the society also we need to have spread the sentiments of democracy, and that is how the role of the civil society, when we talk about the civil society, how does it strengthen the state? If the civil society is more democratic, if it follows the Levantine route of different layers one after another of creating a very vibrant higher structure of democracy, it convert into a better state which will be bereft of undemocratic norms, and it will be dependent on a certain understanding, and that certain understanding will create a viable institutions, and through that the progress of that country, the progress of that state will reach to the height of its progress and strength, and it will not fall down and categorize either as a failed state or as a banana republic, because the benefit is not reaching out to a certain individuals. It is equally spreading to the larger section of the society. So these are the parameters to identify institutions are properly functioning. So now, after explaining the formal and informal pillars of institutions, we come down to the formal structure of the state, under which different categories of the institutions play a very important and prominent role. Take the example of political institutions. Political institution does not mean of holding elections and creating a representative government. There are many countries in the world where the elections take place either after 4 years or 5 years. But the way the election is conducted, it is hugely problematic. It gives a space for undemocratic forces to use muscle power, money power, violence, and all kind of methods to defeat the purpose of a democratic structure. In Liberia, in Uganda, and there are many African countries where the election had taken place, but it was meaningless. In Mexico during the 60s and 70s, which is one of the Latin American countries, merely holding the elections does not justify that it is a democracy has taken the root. It is one of the way of making that country a democratic, but it has a prerequisite requirements that election must be free and fair, where the people those who were in power are not affecting others from getting elected on their merit. If you take the example which is the nearby from us is Myanmar. In 1988, election took place. The legendary political leader Aung San Suu Kyi, she was elected with a big margin, but the military refused to hand over the power by grabbing the power through its military power. And since then, making the excuse one after another and sabotaging the institutions, she was put behind the bar. She was under the house arrest for almost 14 to 15 years. Take the example of Pakistan. Political parties, which are one of the major agents of political institutions, they play a very dubious role in getting the political mileage in the country during the elections by hand in gloves with the terrorist organizations. I could not blame only Pakistan and other countries. We can see in the mirror of our own country how the election is being held in India. Do we think that what is the commonest perceptions? Election is all about a game of rich people, the people, those who are having money, those who are having connections, and wide range of networking. It is not a game of honest and simple people, those who have the commitment and visions for making this country. And that is completely defeat of the purpose of the first Prime Minister of India, who built vigorously the different institutions. Very interesting story about Nehru. When he was being lampooned, he was being cartooned by a famous cartoonist, when after becoming the Prime Minister, and when he saw his own cartoon appearing in the different newspaper, he invited that cartoonist and said in very categorical terms, your spirit of making this cartoon should continue in future with the same vigor, with the same spirit. That will hold me responsible and accountable to people of this country. So giving a space, a democratic space to the media is the building institutions. Giving a space to the judiciary is building a judicial institutions. Following the integrity, following the rule of law is making an institutions. So these are all parts. It is like a body, the bone of a child, which is it gets stronger and larger. If the proper diet, the required nutritious food, protein and other requirements are not being given, then we will have some fundamental organs are weak forever. And that is why in many of the countries, because this importance were not given to the different organs of the body of building a very healthy and a strong human being, the institutions, that particular state gets rogue state. That is called the rogue state. It has multiple disease. It bogs down under the ethnic war. It rules around under the pressure of a caste war. Fundamentalist forces spread their hates, and they time to time kill their own people. It could be very easily understood in the context of Pakistan. It spread the money, it opened madrasas in its own country to create a havoc in India. What is happening? They are killing their own people more than they are killing the Indians across the border. So the nefarious design, the dangerous scheming, which is not part of the development, it will revert back to yourself. And that is same thing is happening in Pakistan, not only in Pakistan, but the countries which are using the back gear to put its car in ahead. It cannot be possible. When you are putting your car in the back gear, it will always go back, it will not go forward. So, of making the institutions stronger, the political institutions like political parties play a very important role. The parliament, which is called the temple of democracy, it should be a place where a different people from across the country, different walks of life, with the wisdom and commitment reach to the temple to make and frame the laws for the country, for the nation building. It also provides a space for debate and dissent. Dissent is a very important factor of any democratic success and structure. We can well remember, after becoming the parliamentary and overwhelming victory of the current Prime Minister, what did he, the two things he said, and which was exhibited by the media and which are learning for all of us. Before entering into the parliament, he touches the parliament and said it is a temple of democracy. He has given the highest regard of the parliament. Giving the highest regard to the parliament by the incumbent prime minister, that showed that he is taking care of institution building. We have been hearing about the people versus parliament debate 2 years back, whether the parliament is powerful or the people are powerful, as if the people and parliament are the two different contradictory setup. That was a debate 2 years back. Some of the people of the different political outfits said something very unhealthy. A parliament is the den of all wrong things, wrongdoings. And finally, he contested the elections for parliament. So, irrespective of that, by giving the importance of parliament, has raised the confidence of the commoners that still it is the most sacrosanct area of democracy. The second example, the present Prime Minister, which showed that creates a building of the institution, is giving importance to a political party. When very senior political leaders of the same party said that the incumbent Prime Minister is very kind to the political party of strengthening it, he said in very emotional terms that no, I am not larger than the party. The party is like my mother, and we are all the child of that political party. So giving important, not any political party, if it is individual centric, then what is happening? We are eroding the institutions. The institution is not well placed. The institution is less than an individual. If it is less than an individual, it will move around on the dictates, on whims and fancies of that particular individual, and that its shadow will also lurk on the larger sections of this country, and it will not move forward. So, political party, either of any ideology, it should not be individual centric. Unfortunately or unfortunately, not only in India, but in Malaysia, Indonesia, and many other parts of the world, a political party are being run by a particular individual. Christopher book which came out in 2012, which discusses about the lineage, the family business of politics in India. The survey has been done by him. A very mesmerizing factual informations were displayed in the book, which depicts that more or less the Indian politics is a bondage of certain families, and that is definitely a bottleneck for a proper functioning of the political institutions in this country. So let's move from conducting a free and fair elections, which is the most important part of democratic representations, and building the institution. The second, the most important part of the formal institution building is judiciary. We have been hearing about positive and negative facts about judiciary, but the role of judiciary is very important, because it is the only agency which can judge what is a good and what is a bad, what is a good institution and what is a bad institutions, who is creating a problems? If the two are fighting, the two cats are fighting, who will sort out the problems? And especially in the different multilingual, multi-religious, multi-sectorial country like India, where we are going to have a complex social economic structure which expunge volumes of the problem for us, we need to have a very functional judicial structure. If it is not well placed, there are many negative factors which we have been hearing and reading out in the newspaper, that volumes of the cases in the Supreme Court to the lower court are pending. There is no free justice. The people are still very scared about the role of the judiciary. These are the all words and these are the all part of the story which we have been hearing. That is true to a certain extent. But definitely, if you try to analyze the functioning of the judicial system in India, it is very impartial, it is well respected, it is well regarded, and it has, over a period of time, tried to win the confidence of the people of this country, despite its severe limitations. But if you look across the boundary of India with Pakistan, the judicial system in Pakistan is being controlled by, to a certain extent, controlled by the executives. In Mexico, it is also, to a certain extent, is dictated by the executives. The president and the prime minister, they have a major say in the appointment. Not only the major say, but their well-wishers, those who are very closely connected with the president and prime minister, become the judges and chief justice of the country. And that defeats the purpose. Because if the judiciary is not independent, if it is not enjoy the autonomy from executive or legislature, it cannot function impartially. Day before yesterday, there was a debate of appointment of the judge of the Supreme Court, one of the very eminent and professional lawyer. He has been denied the ticket, he has been denied the route, the place in the Supreme Court, and it has triggered out into a major controversy, and still it is running on high pitch in India. But if you see the setup system of appointing a judge in the Supreme Court and High Court, we have a very vibrant and strong, well-built setup system, which has a collegium, which includes a different stakeholder from political executive to the judicial administrator, where the role of the Chief Justice is very important. So we try to follow over a period of times to pick up a very strong, who has established himself in the field of law, are the top lawyers as judges of the high courts and the Supreme Court. But if you compare to the America, if you compare to the Canada and many other countries where the system is more flexible, where the system is more transparent, and the role of a judicial system is better than what we have. So the comparative analysis of the judicial structure in India is still a debatable point. But since we have only 65 to 66 years of this experience, and gradually we are becoming more aware about it, we are trying to cut off the undesirable part which have groomed over a period of time in the periphery of judiciary, and we are trying to streamline it for better functions, for betterment of a fair justice to the people of this country. after judicial institutions, if you come down to the security institutions, which are equally important for this country. The security does not mean the internal, but it also includes the external factors. And the power of the sovereignty is only realized when a citizen, it is not only obeying the power of sovereignty, but those who are trying to create a problem for this country are also being deterred by the power of a sovereignty. When the new Prime Minister took the office, he sent a very strong message by inviting all the leaders of the South Asian countries. In a very diplomatic way, he conveyed the message that this country is not going to tolerate any kind of terrorist attack. We cannot be talking in the atmosphere of conflict and war. That is a very categorical, straightforward response to those who are trying to infiltrate and create problems within India. The security agencies which are accountable to the civilian government, that should be made it very clear for well functioning of the democracy. If you take the example of the functioning of the military in Pakistan, in Arab countries, in many other parts of the world, you'd be finding that if it is not controlled by a civilian authority, those who have the political mandate through representations, there is a dichotomy, there is a system of contradictions which crept in, and that erodes the structures of institutions. Like the military itself is the institutions. If the head of the military is being appointed by the president, who is much junior to many of the officers in the hierarchy, what will happen? It will happen that the person who was supposed to be the chief of army, and if he is being denied by the president, he will have a very bad test, and the commitment and professionalism within that military structure will gradually erode. And same thing is that is happening not only in Pakistan but many of the countries, because every president wants his own man on the helm of the military affairs, and that leads to dysfunctioning of the military structure. At the different levels, what they do, they create their own parallel structure, and after creating a parallel structure, they shake the hand with the non-state actors, like those which are very fatal, which are very dangerous for that particular countries. The terrorist outfits shake hand with the military personnel, and that leads to a devastating position. And that is why, if you read the nuclear policy of India, if you read the nuclear policy of Pakistan, we would be hearing a very different kind of tone and texture. We would be hearing a different kind of stories. And not only Indians, but many parts of the world, they are very scared about it, and they call it the South Asia is the most tips, which is sitting on the balcony Why is it so? Because the people, those who are in power in Pakistan, those who are the nuclear buttons are still not very clear who is holding it. Because the military itself is very powerful in Pakistan, and where if you compare the military in India, it is completely under the control of the civilian government. And why it is under the civilian government? Because we have a proper set of system. We have a proper institutions. Military has itself under the civilian authority. So it cannot overrule the orders which will be passed by the Prime Minister and the President. Whereas the order which are being dictated by the President is very smoothly disobeyed by the head of the military. And not only in Pakistan, but in Myanmar, many other parts of the world, they follow the same kind of system. And these lacuna at the larger scale happen because we, at that particular country, unable to create set of system, set of political institutions. So we will continue this lecture with trying to identify what are the limitations and how, where the problem lies and how to make it better, and the different tones and different teachings of political philosophers from India, from other parts of the country, who thought of it, of building a better institution for well functioning of a democracy. Thank you.
Okay, so well friends, in today's lecture we saw the general democratic institution that function in coordination with the other institution, because that is because the balance of institutions are important, otherwise the personal human fancy will take over. That is not accepted in democracy. So that is the beauty of democracy: take a collective decision and the majority voice will prevail. Personal voices will not be of that much of importance. So this is what we wanted to communicate today, and with this word we conclude the lecture, and I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on behalf I thank Dr. Satish Kumar for giving such a wonderful lecture on this very topic. Thank you very much.